Welcome to the For You podcast, where we continue the conversation about the happenings here at Fellowship Chapel. We are a church that is strategically located in the heart of Macomb County, right on the border of Sterling Heights and Warren. So we are for Macomb, we are for the world, and we are for you. My name is Andrew. I'm your host, and I am joined today behind the audio visual by Michael Kylo Rentz.
What's up?
And I'm joined again today by our lead pastor, Robert Wendt.
Good to be with you guys again.
Who we've started calling you Captain Kneecaps due to your man love of the Lions head coach, Motor City, Dan Campbell.
Hey, love it. Love it.
Very good. All right.
I just won't bite anyone's kneecaps off, but
Not today.
not today.
Not today. All right. So one of the things that we're going to talk about today is we've just finished up the For the One series.
Yep.
4-week series where we overviewed basically a view of like the priorities that we need to have as Christians, following after Jesus, where he would leave the 99 sheep to go after the one. We talked about the calling of the early disciples, the women who were involved in his community, and then obviously just recently, the martyring of Stephen and the impact that had on the life of Saul turning into Paul, who then gathered Timothy, Titus, and others.
Correct.
One thing that really stands out, though, is the importance of community, where, Jesus lived a lonely existence at time, but he was also surrounded by people. We've lived these past many years in there's been just a lot of loneliness. Some people call it there being almost an epidemic of friendlessness, especially among men, but everyone generally. I know that's something that's been on your heart lately. What's something that we can actively do about the situation of loneliness right now and establishing a community of believers?
Yeah, it's actually a really good question because there's kind of this dichotomy between the two. There's this sense of when someone says, why do I go to church? Why should I go to church? I always say it's because of the community. You can't just have church online. I would pray that just our online presence isn't your church. We've pushed more and more of an online world, but in that we've lost a sense of community where people feel more lonely than they ever have. And I really think it's going to be in the next couple of years that we're seeing more and more effects of maybe our push towards shutting ourselves away from other people and what that can cause. And so I've seen just the phone calls and the conversations that loneliness seems to be a topic that a lot more people are talking about than they were maybe a few years ago. On the flip side, loneliness can be a blessing. And that's where that's where we see Jesus would spend time alone. Paul showed us that he had times alone, and we can get more into that a little bit. But there's this sense that, one, we need community, but just because we have community doesn't mean we feel a part of something. Something that I would say is loneliness isn't often about crowdedness. So we can be a whole party of people, yet we can feel really lonely. We can feel like we have no purpose, we have no place, we have no friendship, we have no sense of community. I know that's been my case in times where I show up to something and there's a lot of people there, but I feel more lonely than if I didn't show up in the first place. And so that's where I think we sometimes define being busy as not being lonely because we're with people, but yet loneliness goes deeper than that. Loneliness can be this sense of, I don't have a purpose, I don't have a place, what is my calling, I don't fit in, all of those kind of things. And so there's this weird dichotomy that when someone says, I feel alone or I feel lonely, they could be saying a million different things. But what I find is most important is when we answer that or we look at that, we have to be really diving into what is our calling as Christians and how do we have a sense of community in a healthy way in our Christian walk. Does that make sense?
That does. So what are some ways that you think, I always like to say it this way, if it was simple, what would it look like rule?
Yeah.
If it was simple to have a true sense of community and friendships and have that right balance, what do you think it would look like?
Okay, let's start at the beginning of Scripture, Genesis 2.
Okay.
God creates things. He creates the world. He creates man, Adam.
Okay. Got it.
Right? And then what does he say in Genesis 2:18? It's not good for man to be
alone.
There you go. Alone. And then he says what? I will make a helper who's what? Just right for him.
Okay.
Is what some translations would say. Like, I will make a helper who's suitable, who's just right, this helper that he needs. And then what happens when he's with this helper? They go to this tree and they do the one thing that God told him not to do. He could say,
I gave you one rule.
Exactly. And so we could have the debate, was that actually good or bad? Mm-hmm. Right? But I think the important thing is the heartbeat of what God is saying. Look, I want you to have companionship. I want you to have company. I want you to not be alone. But what did they do in rebellion? They said, but God, you aren't enough for us.
Right.
Right? And so that's where we begin to see a change. God gave him that with his presence fully there, and then they don't want his presence fully because they want to be like God, knowing both good and evil. And
that's right, because Jesus came every day during the cool of the day to hang out with them, and then after they fell, they went and hid. And he comes through, he's like, hey guys, where are you at? Mm-hmm. We're hiding.
Yeah, exactly. So if we take a look at some ways that we define loneliness in this world, one way is that we're all alone.
Okay.
And I think this is often really seen as negative. Because have you ever been in a waiting room recently?
Yes, I have.
So I know people feel this need to just be connected, because what's the one thing that everyone does when they're in the waiting room?
They pull their phone out and they scroll.
They do. They're probably on social media. They're probably on different things, trying to see what everyone else in this world is doing. I actually made a rule for myself. I would not bring out my phone when I'm in the waiting room. People look at me like I'm weird.
Do you at least look at a magazine, or do you just like look around?
No, it might be creepy. I do just look around.
Okay.
He's over there just mean mugging people.
No, I am very friendly. All right. But because we should be at a place where we're okay being with our own thoughts. And yet I feel like as a society, we've gotten to a place where we can't even take 2 seconds to think. We have to constantly be feeling like this sense of I'm with other people. So when we feel lonely, we look at what other people are doing, which only makes us feel more lonely because we see what they're doing and we're not. And we only share the things that are exciting in our lives, not the low moments in our lives. And so, follow with me. We think that in order for us to be happy in this world, we always have to be doing something with other people. But when I look at the faith journey, the people that we talk about most in the church were the people who often felt the most alone.
Okay, elaborate on that.
Take Abraham.
All right.
He's called out of all the faiths that everyone has to go for this new faith, to follow this God. Think of Noah. And Noah is in this world that's living for themselves. This unrighteousness surrounds him. And what does Noah do? He's building a boat, just he and his family,
and
right?
everyone's making fun of him. Like, what are you doing, Noah?
Yeah, and that's something we add in the movies and kind of add in our own. Like, I've never seen that in the Bible where it says they're making fun of him. But yeah.
We
I'm with
imply
you.
it.
Look at King David, who built the temple, right? Had his son Solomon. He had the many wives. He had all these riches. And what does he have to do? He has to flee for his life from King Saul, and he finds himself alone. Most of the Psalms that he wrote were when he was doing what?
By himself?
By himself, being chased, alone. You take Elijah. And Elijah was alone and depressed. Remember, he goes under the broom tree and he says, it would be better for me to die than to be here. He has so much despair. Yeah, he's one of the 2 people at the transfiguration of Jesus. Right? Okay. Let's take Ezekiel, 390 days on his side.
Oh, that's right. Ezekiel, he was the one who was laying there and had to do like the play acting thing. And
yeah.
Wasn't he also walking around naked?
That's over a year on his side. Could we even do that? Could we even go a day?
It'd be frowned upon.
Right? Exactly. Or think about Jeremiah, the weeping prophet. Like, I could go with the list over and over and over again. All of these people that we celebrate, like let's take Jeremiah. For instance, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, to give you hope in a future. Jeremiah 29:11. We put it in all of our graduation cards.
Right.
Yet he's known as the weeping prophet.
Mm-hmm.
We lose context of who he is, what he went through. And then you get into the New Testament. It's in 2 Corinthians chapter 11 where Paul says what? I was shipwrecked. I was adrift at sea. all these things that there's this sense of, look, I've done all these things for God, and yet I've all been on my own. And so I'm thinking, and I'm like, well, in a world that defines success or joy as being constantly busy, why would anyone want to emulate their life out of any of these people in the Bible? Because it doesn't seem like they get that, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Even Jesus was rejected. Even Jesus was looked down upon. Even though he had the crowds that followed him, he also had the ridicule that came with it. And so my question is, who would want any of this? And what is the benefit for it? So I get back to, is loneliness a blessing?
Doesn't seem like it.
It doesn't, right?
No, it doesn't.
But Paul said it was better to not marry for the sake of being able to carry out the gospel and do his mission, right? And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I like being married. I love my wife and the family that I have. How is that better? The church, let's be honest, the American church culture, basically as a pastor, you need to have 4 kids, a beautiful family. You have to have a white picket fence around your house. Well, that's maybe just the American dream.
Right.
But, you have to have these
Right.
kind of things that are stereotypical, but nowhere in the Bible do I find that as the stereotype, right? Yet we've made it our cultural stereotype. And so we constantly are feeding ourselves with this desire that we have to always be busy.
Right.
But C.S. Lewis, who's one of my favorite authors and theologian, because he loved his story, being an Oxford professor and converting to Christianity, and even the Chronicles of Narnia and stuff, great things that he wrote, but his works for Christianity are fantastic. And in 1941, he gave a message called The Weight of Glory. And in that message, he said this. He said, we live, in fact, in a world starved for solitude.
Starved for solitude.
In 1941.
Okay. That was pre-smartphone.
Well, yeah. I mean, was the TV even? It was definitely black and white. Was it even there, though?
I don't know. We'd have to check.
Maybe the radio was the cool
We
thing.
got radio. We have radio.
Did we have radio? Yeah.
Should have had radio.
Right? And then he says silence in private. And therefore, we're starved for meditation and true friendship. So even in 1941, C.S. Lewis pointed out that we have these things in our lives that are so busying us that we're actually starving ourselves from solitude. So do you see the dichotomy here?
Yeah.
So there's this need for solitude. So then I want to go to a passage in the Bible where I think we really kind of see what Jesus emulated for us when it came to this. It's in Mark chapter 6. In a little preview, we're going to be doing the Gospel of Mark as a church, so I'm excited for that journey. But it's in Mark chapter 6 where it says this starting in verse 30, and I have a Bible here to read it. The apostles returned to Jesus from their ministry tour and told him all they had done and taught. So here they come back. Can you imagine? Like, oh, Jesus, all these things had happened, and this is what this happened, this. Then Jesus said, let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place and rest a while. Doesn't rest sound good sometimes?
It does. It does.
He said this because there were so many people coming and going that Jesus and his apostles didn't even have time to eat. How busy were they? So then what happens? The crowds keep following, and they have this miracle where he feeds the 5,000. And then what happens after the feeding of the 5,000? If we go towards the end of the chapter, or I should say halfway through the chapter, after he takes the fish and all of that, it says in verse 45, immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back in the boat and head across the lake while he sent the people home. So now Jesus says, get away. You guys get away. And then watch what Jesus does. After telling everyone goodbye, he went up into the hills by himself to pray. Why would Jesus do this? Why would he go on his own? Now, some of us would say, well, I'm introverted, and so I need that time in order to recharge, right? And the introvert would really get that. They would really understand.
I'm an introvert. I completely understand that.
I don't know if that's true.
I'm 50-50 on it. He might be, but he might be like that hybrid in between where you're a showman, but you're also got to recharge on your own.
Extrovert, introvert, ambivert.
Okay.
Carry on.
So we have these feelings of introverted versus extroverted, and we kind of label them, right? But we see Jesus took this time to go away and to be with God. And this is what I think we can learn. Loneliness in times alone, and even extended time alone, and I would argue extended time alone, allow us to connect deeper with God. And we don't teach solitude much at all, do we? We see it as a bad thing.
Yes.
There was St. John of the Cross. Are you familiar with him?
I'm not.
He was a priest from the 1500s, and some of his works are well recognized. And he says this: the language of God is the language of silence. How often are we like, I need constant noise in my life. I need God to constantly speak to me. I need him to always be talking with me. Yet we crowd our life with so much noise that we can never listen.
Have you ever tried to drive in your car without turning on the radio?
I've actually started doing it more.
So you start driving along and you say, I have no radio. And you're just thinking about stuff and you're driving along. And then you like get to a red light and without even thinking about it, you go hit the button. Like, oh, wait.
Or you grab your phone.
No, can't do that in the state of Michigan. It's against the law. And we follow all the laws.
I had a pastor tell me once that to help improve your prayer life, have a conversation, right? Just talk with it. Act like he's sitting next to you. And every time now when I shut off the car, I have some good prayers because the radio's not playing. Don't get me wrong. Me and Jesus jam out some worship. But when I just sit there and drive, like that silence, that gives me a lot of time to reflect on what I'm working on, what I need to be praying about, all kinds of stuff like that.
But we're okay with solitude for a few moments. Take Saint Augustine. Augustine of Hippo.
Mm-hmm.
He lived in the 300s. So this is pretty early Christianity, right? He basically taught that solitude is a moral necessity.
A moral necessity.
Yeah, that's not his quote.
Okay,
but I'm
just the content of what he's
the
saying.
content of. I mean, he literally lived his life where he really went for complete solitude, getting away from like the whole busyness of everything. And the whole point is we are to retreat from the crowd into the depths of our conscience. That until we actually can get inward with ourselves and we can get to the really like root of who we are, and until we can get to that place of even discomfort and just a place where it's only us, it's then that we realize it's not only us, but it's us and God. And we allow him to speak to us in a much deeper way. I'm not saying I'm good at this. I'm just bringing it out as something that I think we've lost, is the idea that being alone can be a blessing. St. Augustine wrote the Confessions. He wrote City of God. Most Western Christians and Eastern Christians look to St. Augustine.
Yep.
I would agree, though. I mean, there was a time in my life where I was forced into solitary situation. And I mean, I tell you all the time, I sometimes wish I could go back to that because of how close I was with God, how dependent I was in my relationship with him, like, and how every day, like, it was just like, all right, what are we working on today? And I mean, I'm telling Robert, I've had that conversation with you how many times about how I wish I could go back to that situation, not the circumstances, but the relationship I had with him when I was in that solitary.
And you feel like God is there.
Deeply. When everything else gets moved away, like he's able to be so much more brighter because you're not getting distracted by your phone, I mean, we all talk about falling down the rabbit hole on YouTube or doing this, or how many people get up in the morning. I caught myself doing this, getting up, TikTok, Instagram, and just ingesting that instead of taking that moment and saying, all right, God, you know, what do you want to tell me in your word today? Or, you know, what's something I should focus on today? Or just focusing on him. You know, I'm not a person that says your first fruits have to be the Bible. Some people that doesn't work for, but I don't think that you should be ingesting the TikTok or any of that stuff at the first thing in the morning, right?
Right.
Because how are you setting yourself up? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I had that moment today even. I literally am trying to take in all of the happening of the football, right, from the NFL.
Right.
And I'm taking all that in, and it's like I heard God just say to me, but what about me? You want to fill your life with all the other things, but what about me? I'm right here. I want to speak to you. I want time with you.
Right.
Are you giving me that time? And it's because we often fill our lives. And so I guess the whole thing I'm trying to say is sometimes running from loneliness is what actually causes us to run from God. But if we push into the blessing of that time, and maybe we're in a season or you're in a season where you're feeling really alone, is that not a time to press into God? And maybe he has a rich, rich, rich blessing for you that you're missing out on because you're trying to fill your life with crud versus filling your life with him. And so I just want to encourage us. Yes, community is important and we can get into that. Yes, we need the body of believers. Yes, Jesus had a community, but he also had times of silence with just him and God. And some of the greatest people and contributors to the Christian faith are the ones who understood the need to have those times of solitude and times alone with God. And so that's really what I want to encourage us to kind of press into and look into as we think of that.
All right. Well, what we'll do is let's take a quick break, get a word from our sponsors, and then we're going to dig in a little bit more into this.
Hi, it's Luke. On Saturday, November 4th at 9:30 a.m. at the First Church on the corner building, we'll be partnering with the City of Sterling Heights for another Shrine Day. A great opportunity where we get to help our neighbors throughout the city. If you've been a part of it before, you know it's great impact. If you're interested in joining us, please sign up. We hope to see you there.
All right, so we're back. So now, one thing we love to do here is we love to be really, really practical with everything. So in terms of regarding loneliness, and again, there's a lot that we still have to work through on this because this is very alien to all of us. The idea of embracing that solitude and that sense of loneliness, which is so counterintuitive. What are some practical ways we can approach this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, I'm one who my mind is always racing.
Okay.
Maybe you could say attention deficit, where I always am kind of squirrel. And so for me, the idea of just silence is deafening. Like that is horrible to me. And so I say all this and then all of a sudden I'm the one who's like, not exactly the best example. But some things I've learned is a couple things. One is just putting my phone away.
Okay.
I've been realizing more and more how much that darn thing is a distraction. When my kids, why do they want the phone? Because that's what they see dad on. And if they see dad on the phone, they want to be like dad. But shouldn't I be a present dad and not one distracted by what the latest NFL score is or what my fantasy football team is doing or any of that? I struggle with that.
Yes.
What if it comes to, like I use the example of being in the waiting room? Am I okay just sitting there and saying, wow, God, you gave me the opportunity to just sit for a moment and let me just wrestle through some thoughts there. So those are a couple. So just the phone, maybe put the phone away. But then because of me needing other means to help me stay focused, because that might last for about a minute, I have a couple apps. Now I sound counterintuitive. Go back to the phone. But there's an app called Pray As You Go. And in it, there's actually a bunch of different guided prayers. And one is called the Examine. And I love doing the Examine at the end of a day. I'll put my AirPods in and I'll just lay in bed and just listen to the guide. And what it does is it helps you recap your entire day. Who did you meet with? Who did you talk with? What did you spend time doing? What did you learn? All of these things. And how often do we rush to the next thing that we don't even have time to process what we've been doing? And so I love that app. They even have daily prayer guides. So a lot of times I'll get in the car and I'll just turn that on as the first thing so that I can listen to the prayer prompt for the day. The other app that I don't use as frequently, but I know has been popular, is called Abide. It's more of a meditation type based, but it's more scripture, Christian based understanding of it. And so those are two practical guides. Maybe you're not like, I'm good with total silence, but I need that in between. I think those are a good step in that direction. I'd love to say just sit down with the Bible and read it. But if you're like me, you start reading and your mind starts wandering. And so that's why even if you're reading, maybe you need a little music in the background. Maybe you need some type of stimulant to kind of help your brain because our brains aren't trained.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm no neuroscientist or anything like that, so don't take me like I know that, but I don't think our brains, I think we have trained them so that they're not used to silence.
Right.
Right?
I think so. Makes sense.
So that's a couple practical steps.
Very good. All right. So now, I mean, I'm always studying productivity things.
Mm-hmm.
There's a popular writer, what is that? I think his name is Cal. That's not Cal Newport. Talks about
that's him.
digital minimalism, deep work.
Mm-hmm.
So what type of routine, like for example, for you, when you're doing these things, like what is your daily routine with stuff to like be able to try to set up quiet time or to do your daily, Bible reading? Because I think that might be, kind of a practical application too, is that people who understand like, hey, I need to budget some of that solitude. Because isn't it what Martin Luther who said, I spend like 3 hours in the morning in prayer, otherwise I can't get anything done.
Mm-hmm.
And then we hear that and go, yeah, I'm not doing that. Yeah, the eyes you just gave. Sometimes that's not practical, but sometimes, maybe doing an inventory of your time, writing down, all right, how much time do I actually do things? What time do I wake up in the morning? And what time do I need to leave for work? Do I have time to do some of those other things? Sometimes doing that is helpful. Like, because it's not so much like the deep work. It's not, there's another book, I think Daniel Pink called When. It's not what you do, but when you do it. Because very often it's like at the end of the day, all right, I'm going to do my devotions at night right before bed. Or I'm going to pray before I go to sleep. And then you get into bed and then you fall asleep very, very promptly.
Yeah. So for me, my car has become my mini sanctuary.
Okay.
I know, Michael, you even had talked about your car. And the reason is if I get up, even if I get up early, like the other day I got up and I'm thinking, man, I'm doing good. And all of a sudden I hear these feet walking down the hallway.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, it's like 6:30 in the morning. And my 7-year-old seriously up right now? I'm like, this is not going to be good. So having kids in my stage of life can be really challenging because if I'm home, like there's nothing. And if it's at the end of the day, I'm checked out.
Right.
And so I actually had to familiarize with myself with that. And I found there's chunks of time where you're more productive than others. So if I do deep work, as Newport's book is called, in those times, I actually can get a whole lot more done in an hour, let's say, than at a certain time it might take me 3 hours. But in my car, what I can do is I can pull into the parking lot and I can just sit in the car. So what if it's making sure I'm somewhere 5 minutes earlier versus trying to be there right at the last second?
Mm-hmm.
And I can just sit in the car and read. Or I can just sit in the car and pray. Or if I'm driving, is there something I can do? Like, can I just go through prayer prompts and just pray with God? Can I put the Bible even on an audio version and just listen to the Word of God? Are there ways that I can say, okay, God, in this time that I'm in my car, I'm going to give this time to you? I've even done things where I know that if I pull into my driveway, the kids come out right away. So maybe it's allowing 5 minutes before I leave to just get those 5 minutes in. And so just seeing where in my schedule can I just make sure that I have time to be alone. Now, I wish I could say I'm the king of going on these spiritual retreats and all of that. I would love to get to that place. I have a lot of mentors who have gotten to that place. I'm not there yet, but I think those are very fruitful as well.
Very good. So now let's switch over from loneliness to the idea, though, that some people are saying, that's great, Robert. That's but they're like, that's easy for you to say. You're a pastor.
I only work a half a day a week too.
I know. So you have all this free time to be doing all these things. Mm-hmm. For people who are say like they are lonely and they say they don't have friends, what do we think are some practical ways that we can give people advice on being able to meet and make friends? Because again, we can embrace that loneliness and we can develop our relationship with God. But again, some people, they are lonely and they do need that sense of community. Because again, that is what the church is for, to encourage and equip each other. What are some practical ways you think we can make friends?
That's a fantastic question. Almost that sense of the opposite. I have so much time alone and I'm even maybe nervous or scared to talk with someone or scared to have a conversation with someone new. I think that is a very big challenge. And even maybe I'm scared of interacting with them. for me, my one piece of advice is just take a risk. I'm reading this book with my one son, and it's a Jocko Willenick book.
Oh, is it the Way of the Warrior Kid?
Yep, The Way of the Warrior
Nice.
Kid. Yeah, exactly. And this kid, he talks about how he's bullied and how he can't swim and how he can't do pull-ups and all of these things. And his uncle, Jake, says to him, he says, those are all things that you can fix.
Yes.
And so he spends his summer learning jujitsu and doing pull-ups and learning to swim. And so what does he do? He becomes a confident kid. Once we do it, even if the fear of rejection is causing us to not step out, what's the worst thing that can happen? We get rejected. But if we can get up and we can try it again, what happens? Eventually, we're going to see that step, conquering that fear, allows us to accomplish it. You don't just do a pull-up the first time you hold on to a pull-up bar. Now, some kids, like my 4-year-old, that's just natural to him, right? He just has fun doing pull-ups. But he's also only 35 pounds, right? And so for some of us, the thought of, okay, how do I do the pull-up in life called meeting a new friend or meeting a new person? Sometimes it means just hanging on that bar, feeling like a fool, but building that strength so that the next time and the next time we eventually can do it.
Very good. See, other ways, because, you obviously you can meet people at work. Sometimes you can, you can share this podcast link with some people at work or people that you know and say, hey, there's a really great podcast. You should listen to it. Tell me what you think about it. You can talk about that. Getting to know people at church, coming to church, maybe joining a community group or getting involved in a ministry together where you're serving together. That could be a way. So that way you have a shared focus of something that you have to have in common where it's not kind of awkward.
Yeah, see, I went so hypothetical. You're going very practical. I like this, Andrew. Like, how did you find, I'm going to ask the question to you.
We're not allowed to do that.
How did you find your love of soccer?
Oh, my love of soccer. Oh, well, see, soccer's great. I played it in high school because I went to a Christian school. And like most Christian schools, we couldn't afford the insurance or have enough kids to play football. So we all played soccer. And then, went off to college. Again, main sport down south, soccer. So it's just that sport you grow up with, the sport you enjoy, but you've got that camaraderie with your buddies, cheering for your team. And so that carries over with some of the passions. So even a good friend here I have at church, when my son was little, we went to sign him up for youth soccer here in the city of Warren. And one of the people at the church was a coach. And he said, hey, have your son join our team. So we did. So then I was there and I was like, they were the coach and I was just the dad there and I was helping out and I knew a little bit more about soccer. So before you know it, I'm helping him coach. And then before you know it, we're coaching our kids together. And then we have great years together, coaching soccer together, even though neither of us really knew all that much. But we developed a really good friendship out of it, just out of that love for soccer and having our kids learn how to play soccer.
And I've heard people tell me a story of someone invited them over just to watch a soccer game or something, and they knew nothing about it, but it was the invite, and then them watching that game with them caused the friendship to form and caused an interest in the game to percolate. Now, I have an interest more in the American football, but that bonds me with other people, right? If I can sit and talk about things like what did the Lions do this past week, that helps just kind of bridge that gap. And so sometimes it's studying up on maybe things you're not interested in. I'll give a shout out to my wife. I didn't ask her for permission to share this, but
we can edit it out if we need to.
There we go. She always never really got into the game of football. But then with 2 boys and a husband who loves watching football, eventually she said, what, I'm going to, just for the sake of being around my family, get to know it more. And so she could have just shut off and she could have just said, I'm leaving. I'm not going to be a part of this. But she engaged in it. Mm-hmm. And now it's something that I see her playing football with the kids and she's understanding the game more. And so it took her learning something she had no interest in, but it builds a deeper bond. And so we could do that with our coworkers and our neighbors or whoever it is. Find something that maybe they're interested in that you're not interested in and learn more about it.
Yeah. Good thing. I think sometimes we often overcomplicate these things, or we want someone to be, it's our best friend right off the bat. I mean, I've got work buddies, I've got church buddies, and I've got people who overlap those differently, where they are those real, genuine friendships. But sometimes you just develop that relationship with the person that you have. Like, again, you tease about football, you tease about soccer. There's a guy here at the church as well who he likes Arsenal, and I don't like Arsenal. But yet we tease and we laugh. And when my team loses, Manchester United, he has gleeful joy making fun of me about it. But again, it's a friendship that developed over something that was a mutual interest that wasn't forced, but it also, something that we both enjoyed to be able to tease about.
And here's another practical step. If I wanted to learn more about you, Andrew, or if I'm like, you know what, this Andrew guy seems pretty cool and I want to get to know him, I'm going to ask you, Andrew, what are you interested in? And what are you going to say?
I'll be like, why is this weird person asking me these questions?
Like, in a more natural way.
I'll be like, I am...
Like, hi, Andrew. I'm Robert. It's nice to meet you. And you say, hi, I'm Andrew. Kind of natural interaction. Right. I say, like, what are some of the things like you're interested in? Or maybe I see, hey, you're wearing this soccer shirt or whatever it might be, right? And I find a thing. And then if I start engaging you in what you're interested in, now you're going to just start talking to me about it.
Exactly.
And I'm just going to sit there and listen. And then you're going to be like, he's the best guy in the world because I got to share what I'm passionate about. And you could talk my ear off about soccer and I'll just nod and say, okay, that's great.
All right. How about you, Michael? Give us some input here.
I'll be honest. What I do is I use vulnerability as an asset, not a weakness. Some of my best friendships have developed out of me being who I am and being okay with who I am and letting people know who I am in that process. If I want to be your friend, Andrew, I'm going to come up to you and say, hey, man, I really actually genuinely like who you are. I want to be your friend. I know that sounds scary and it sounds like we're not supposed to do that, especially as guys, but it has formed some of the best bonds that I have. I mean, I've talked with both of you deeply and I've, expressed that with you guys and I would consider us really good friends. Does that make sense?
When you actually meet someone who genuinely cares about you, it's very, very rare. And then we as believers, yes, we want to emulate and understand that we need to have time with the Lord and we need to be comfortable being alone with him and being able to stand alone if we need to. But on the flip side, we're also made to be part of a community. We're made to be gathered with a group of believers. That's why when people say, I don't need to go to church to worship God, I can do it just as well out fishing or out hunting or at the football game. These are all truthful statements. Sure. But number one, you're not going fishing or hunting or the football game to worship God. You're doing it to go fishing, hunting, or watching the football game. And second, it's not about you. A lot of times, the times when you do go to church, it's the idea is to encourage one another. Why do we sing on Sunday mornings? It's not to glorify our great voices. It's to encourage one another in song. It's we're with a group serving and worshiping God together. So, when Jesus sent out the disciples, when he sent them out 2 by 2. Because by alone, they might lose their nerve, but together with friends, they did it. When Paul went out and did things, he went with Paul and Barnabas. Paul and Barnabas, they went out, and originally they took John Mark with them. John Mark went to one stop, and he was done. And he quit. That's why Paul and Barnabas broke up, just because... Barnabas wanted John Mark to go again. Paul was like, no, he bailed on us last time. I'm not doing it this time. They had a heated falling out. Barnabas walked off the pages of the New Testament to mentor and be a friend to John Mark, who'd had that defeat. Paul went on and he went with Silas, but sometime later in the letters that Paul wrote, he said, hey, bring John Mark because he's valuable to me. So, sometimes the friendships we have, it doesn't have that fruit we want, but Barnabas walked off the pages of the New Testament and he invested in John Mark more. And now we get the Gospel of Mark and we learn more about Mark, who's more famous than just being the guy who had his clothes ripped off him in the garden and running naked through the garden and such. We're built for community. Paul was more successful as a group. Jesus was always with his Father. There's the perfect, we don't talk about it much, it's that perfect relationship within the Trinity. God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, where they can both model for us that loneliness. But on the other hand, they did have perfect relationship. And we as Americans, we always want to be like, no, I don't need it. We're the cowboy. Clint Eastwood, I'm the desperado out there by myself. I don't need anyone. We all need someone. Even if we went with the, You know, the old joke about the Spartan shield wall. You're only as strong as the person who's next to you. And that's very much the same, I would say, with we are. We all have to look out for each other and look out for each other's kids and be a part of a community. Again, that's just my 2 cents.
I was that person that was, I don't need, just me and God. I would go to churches. I would go to all different churches, you know, and, you know, I'd be a part of ministry, stuff like that, but I never dove into community or fellowship or anything like that. And it's me and God versus the world, and I'm okay with that, you know, because, you know, in situations you have open hand, closed hand, and things like that, right? And so if you didn't disagree, well, me and God, we got this. I'll pray for you. I'll pray for your church, pray for that, blah, blah, blah. But it's me and him when we're leaving today. And I was okay with that because, you know, part of my journey, I was on that, solitary part, and it's good. And then I came to fellowship, and I started to learn what, like, real community meant, and I started putting myself into it. And I got to say, like, yes, solitude is important, and having those moments alone, but having a community that on your highest high, they will celebrate with you, and when you fall down flat on your face, they will help you pick up the pieces. That is a crucial part, especially as a Christian walk. That is a crucial part to have that. As a young man, or, you know, one of the things Robert says is you should always mentor up and mentor someone down and have someone on the same level. And I think that, in a nutshell, is what community is. You have someone that's pouring into you, you're pouring into somebody, and you have somebody that's going out to you village to village and knocking on the doors. And that's, you know, that was like a pivotal point in my walk, because I learned that I don't have to carry it all. I could be like, hey, like we came in today, and hey man, it was a hard Monday. Yeah. And you ever just have one of those Mondays? You know, me and you call each other all the time, and we have those conversations. Hey man, how's it going? Me and Robert meet all the time, and we have those conversations of just pouring into each other and just, you know, walking thick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's one thing I've really appreciated about the For the One series. Very often when we talk about discipleship in a church context, we think about it like it's an army going to war or it's a sports team competing in something. But we never really focus on it, the individual. You know, the basic training that the soldier goes through, the quiet, deep work that the athlete is going through at 4 o'clock in the morning at the gym to be prepared for the game. We see the competition, we see it in play or in action, but we don't think about the individual training of the individual. And that's where I think this concept about the loneliness and getting comfortable with it, that's one of those spiritual disciplines I think we do need to spend more time thinking about. Because even as you were talking about it, I was feeling uncomfortable with it. Like, oh, yeah, but that is that time to be quiet, to be still and know that I am God, and to develop that along with the other spiritual disciplines, so that way we can, you know, be the men we're called to be and those type things.
Yeah, and that's where I guess I'll just cap it with, there's nothing more important than community. You can surround yourself with a million friends, but if you don't have a mentor, if you don't have someone that you're pouring into, if you don't have someone that's walking beside you, you're going to feel lost. And there is that tangible way that God puts people in our lives to be his hands and feet. And we find that in community. We find that in church. That's why I believe in the local church so passionately. But on the other side of it, we have to get real and honest with the fact that sometimes we're seeking so much affirmation from people, or we're seeking so much fulfillment from people, that we're afraid to seek it from God and God alone. And that's where, when we get to that real place of I can put these things to the side and it can just be God and I, we realize how much bigger God is than we ever thought before. And that's where there's this balance that we have to figure out in life. Yeah, we need community, but we also need solitude, and we need that quiet time.
Very good. All right, let's go with another word from our sponsors, and we'll be back.
Hey there, it's Anthony, one of your elders here at Fellowship Chapel. I want to talk about an exciting opportunity called the Fellowship Bible Institute. This is a program led by seminary-trained instructors who will take you even further in the Word than you do maybe on a typical Sunday or in a community group. It's a great opportunity to investigate further the biblical truths. If you want more information or to apply, see Don Petty or Robert Wen.
All right, so we're back. All right, we have a brand new segment that we have today. It's called, Is It in the Bible or Is It Not in the Bible?
Oh man, gonna see my true biblical
All right,
knowledge.
So here we go. What I have here, I have 11 common phrases that you didn't know were from the Bible, and also 11 things that you think are in the Bible, but aren't. So now here's the choice you have. Do you guys want to go compete against each other, or do you want to work as a team here on these first few that we're going to do?
I want to take down the pastor.
All right, so we're
Let's
going to do
go.
this? All right, here we go. All right, so I'm going to give you an item. Let's just do 5 to start here. And then you just say, is it in the Bible? Is it not in the Bible? And then we'll find out. All right, here we go. Number 1. When we say a house divided against itself cannot stand, is that from the Bible or not from the Bible?
That is in the Bible.
Yeah, it is in the Bible.
Okay, it is in the Bible. So is that our final answer? You're both saying it's in the Bible?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. This quote is often attributed to Abraham Lincoln, like most everything on the internet. But while the 16th president of the United States did use the phrase in a famous speech, he didn't invent it. Jesus did. When rebuffing Pharisees that he was casting out demons because he was possessed himself, Jesus uttered the phrase that would later be used by Lincoln, become an episode title of a 1980s primetime soap opera and spoofed by a 90s sitcom.
I actually read a biography on Abraham Lincoln, and one of his biggest frustrations with the little log cabin life is all he had was a Bible to read.
Oh, really?
So he memorized the Bible. So in a lot of, I don't know if he completely but he knew it so well that I'm sure it would be in a ton of his addresses and stuff.
Very good. All right, so now 1-1. All right, here we go. All right. A leopard can't change his spots. So you say a leopard can't change his spots. Also a famous quote by Roy Keane, Manchester United legend, about the locker room.
I do not recall that in the scriptures.
Do you not recall that? So you're saying it is.
No, right off.
You're saying no. You're
No.
saying no. All right.
So you got to vote against me, Robert. That's how we're going to go.
From Porter Wagner and Elvis to the Roots and Blondie, the phrase has provided many musicians a lyrical turn of phrase. Supposedly, you are what you are, just like a leopard cannot change its spots. A person cannot change their nature. In the middle of God describing the sinful nature of his people in Jeremiah 13, he maintains that they are stuck in their ways and cannot change, just like a leopard and his spots.
Wow, okay.
Oh man, I think I'm, failing at my biblical knowledge
You
here.
got one right, you got one wrong.
All right,
Darn
here we go.
weeping
Here we go.
prophet
Okay, here we
got
go.
me again.
Here we go. God will not give you more than you can handle.
Not in the Bible.
That is not in the Bible.
Not in the Bible. 100 times not in the Bible.
Not in the Bible? All right. This is the result of some presumably well-meaning person trying to sum up 1 Corinthians 10:13 as a way of comforting a person going through a trial, but that's not what that verse or any other verse in the Bible teaches us. You find countless cases where someone faced with something they couldn't handle, but God could and did. That's the point. Including Paul's words to the Corinthians where he tells them God will provide a way of escape from temptation. If we could handle everything that came our way, we could take care of our sin problem. But we couldn't and we can't. That's why we needed and continually need Jesus. All right, you guys are doing well
So
again.
it is 2-2 right now.
We're tied. If
All
didn't
right.
get the darn Jeremiah passage, please.
All right, here we go. Escaping by the skin of your teeth. Escaping by the skin of your teeth.
This would be a great question for my wife since she's in the dental industry. Do you even have skin on your teeth? You have enamel, right?
Even enamel.
I'm going to say not in the Bible.
Bible, what do
I'm
you
going to
think?
say am so we can break away from
All right,
this.
here we go. Escaping by the skin of your teeth. When a movie hero makes a narrow escape, just avoiding the imminent danger, we say they escaped by the thinnest of margins, the skin of their teeth. Perhaps surprisingly, that phrase comes from someone who didn't seem to escape it all. After all of the calamities Job endured, he says he escaped with his life by the skin of his teeth in Job 19:20.
That was a shot in the dark.
Oh, man.
All right.
Every now and then a squirrel finds a nut.
All right, here we go. Last one. Here we go. And another one's gone.
I'm winning right now.
And another one's gone.
And the pastor's 50%.
And another one bites the dust. Bite the dust. Is that in the Bible or is that not in the Bible?
So the phrase
bite
the dust.
Bite the dust.
Nope. I'm gonna go no.
Jesus says to kick the dust off of your feet.
That's where I got hung up. I think it's close. That's why I'm saying no.
But he doesn't say bite the dust.
I'm gonna say no.
So here's my struggle.
Okay.
If I say no, I concede the win to Michael.
You do. Sorry.
If I say yes, I risk not only the tie, because there's no winning here for me, but also going under 50% if I was wrong. See my dilemma?
So you got.
So clearly everyone knows I don't know if this is in the Bible or not, but I'm going to say the opposite of Michael.
All right. So you said it's
No.
not in the Bible. You're saying now it is in the Bible. All right. Is there a Western movie that doesn't describe someone dying as they're having bit the dust? We use it today to speak of almost anything that has broken down and is no longer of use. While the exact words didn't originate in the Bible, the earliest citation is from a Scottish author in 1750. The inspiration is biblical. Psalm 72:9 is a prayer that the enemies of the king will lick the dust.
I think lick counts as bite.
That is not bite.
What translation are we having?
Neither licking or biting dust sounds enjoyable. Very good. All right, well, that is a lighthearted end to this episode of the For You podcast. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the For You podcast. If you do us a favor and if you like this content, please like and subscribe. And if you have any ideas for any future guests or topics you'd like covered, please just put them in the comment section and we'll look at them there. And we'll see you next time.